He came home with a busted truck, a 6-year-old boy, and $1,100 in a coffee can. That was supposed to be the worst of it. Then he saw her across the fence. The girl he'd promised the world to when they were both 12 years old. The girl whose name he hadn't spoken in 20 years. Standing there in her grandfather's oversized coat, looking at him like he'd finally come to keep his word. She hadn't. He hadn't even remembered. And somewhere in that silent yard, between her tired eyes and his son's small hand, a debt neither of them could see yet was already coming for both of them. The truck died twice on the dirt road before it finally gave up at the top of the rise, coughing a last gray plume into the October afternoon and rolling the last 20 feet on its own momentum. Caleb Rowan let it. He didn't touch the brake. He let the old Ford drift until the front tire caught the lip of the driveway and stopped on its own, and then he sat there with his hands on the wheel and looked at the house he had sworn, at 19, he would never see again. It looked worse than he remembered. That was the first honest thought he had. The porch sagged on the left side where the post had rotted through. The screen door hung by one hinge, ticking against the frame in the wind like somebody tapping a fingernail on a table, waiting. Paint that used to be white had gone to the color of old teeth, and the maple his mother had planted the year he was born had dropped half its leaves into the gutter, where they'd sat long enough to grow a small green mat of moss. The windows were dirty. One of them, upstairs, was broken and patched with a piece of cardboard that said Chiquita across it in faded blue letters, home, such as it was. Daddy. The voice was small and careful, the way Owen's voice had been careful for almost a year now, ever since the morning he'd come into the kitchen in Dallas and found his mother crying and his father with a bag by the door. 6 years old and already talking like a man who didn't want to say the wrong thing. Yeah, bud. Is this it? Caleb looked at his son. Owen was buckled into the passenger seat with a stuffed dinosaur in his lap, and his sneakers not quite touching the floor mat. He had Rachel's eyes, which was a knife Caleb had learned to live with, and Caleb's own stubborn chin, which was something else. This is it. It's big. It used to be nice. Oh. Owen considered that. He had learned in the past year that a lot of things used to be. Can I get out? Give me a second. Caleb got out first. His knees cracked when he stood. 12 hours on the road from the motel in Little Rock, and 2 days before that from the apartment he couldn't pay for anymore. And his back had the particular seized-up ache of a man who'd slept in a driver's seat with a child curled across his lap. He stretched and heard something pop in his neck and didn't care. The wind came up the hill smelling of wet leaves and wood smoke from somewhere, and under that, the thin green smell of a pond going into winter. 20 years since he'd smelled that exact combination. It hit him behind the eyes before he was ready, and he had to turn around and pretend to check the tie-downs on the truck bed for a second until his throat came loose. Okay, he said. Come on. He lifted Owen down. The boy was heavier than he used to be and lighter than he should be, and Caleb made a note of it the way he made notes of everything lately. A running list of what he had to fix, in what order, with what money. Stay close to me, okay? We don't know what's in the yard. Like snakes? Maybe snakes. Okay. Owen took his hand without being asked. Caleb felt the small hot palm settle into his own and thought, not for the first time and not for the last, that he would walk through fire barefoot before he let this boy down again. They walked up the driveway. The yard was worse up close. Knee-high grass where his mother had kept a vegetable garden. A rusted tricycle under the hedge that wasn't his and wasn't Owen's and had been there apparently long enough to have a bird's nest in the seat. The porch steps bowed under his weight but held. He tried the front door, locked. He remembered with the kind of vague surprise that had become normal since the lawyer's office that he'd been the one to lock it, the day after the funeral, 11 years ago. He fished the key out of his jacket pocket. It was brass and tarnished and attached to a little leather tag that said, in his mother's handwriting, Front. The lock turned like it had been waiting. The house smelled like dust and a little like mouse, and underneath that, faintly, like the lavender sachets his mother used to tuck into drawers. That smell almost dropped him. He stood in the doorway with Owen's hand in his and waited until he could breathe again. Smells funny, Owen said. I know. Like old people. Yeah. They went in. The light through the grime on the front windows was the color of weak tea. Sheets on the furniture, the way she'd always done when they went away for more than a weekend. He pulled one off the couch, and a cloud of dust went up, and Owen sneezed 3 times in a row like a cartoon. "Bless you." "Thanks. Let's open some windows." They went room to room. Caleb opened every window that wasn't painted shut, and for the ones that were, he made a mental note, and by the time they got to the kitchen, there was a real draft moving through the house, smelling of the yard instead of itself. The kitchen was the hardest. The same yellow curtains, the same chipped enamel stove, the same crooked little shelf over the sink where his mother had kept her 3 African violets, now empty. A coffee cup still sat in the drainer. It had dried soap on the rim. He turned his back to it and opened the cabinets and took stock. "We're going to need to go to town," he said. "Couple of things." "Okay. You want to see your room first?" "Which one's my room?" "Which one do you want?" Owen's face did something complicated. "I get to pick?" "You get to pick." The boy went up the stairs like he was afraid of waking something up. Caleb followed, pretending not to notice how Owen's hand trailed along the banister just to touch it, the way a kid touches a museum exhibit they've been told not to touch. There were 3 bedrooms upstairs. Caleb's old one at the end of the hall, his mother's in the middle, and the little one over the porch that had been the guest room, and before that, back when she was still alive, his grandmother's. Owen walked into each one and walked out again, and in the third one he stopped. This one, the little one. Of course the little one. It had a window that looked out over the side yard, and beyond it the fence, and beyond that, the neighbor's overgrown field. There was a narrow iron bed with the mattress rolled up against the headboard, and a child-sized dresser with a porcelain knob missing. "Yeah? Yeah. Okay. This is your room." Owen nodded, very seriously, as if they had signed a contract. Caleb left him there to pull the sheet off the dresser and went back down to bring in the bags. He had 2 duffels, a cardboard box of Owen's toys, a cooler with the last of the food from the motel mini-fridge, and, on the seat, the coffee can. The coffee can he carried separately. He set it on the kitchen table and looked at it for a second before he took the lid off to check, even though he'd checked at every gas station between here and Little Rock. $1,116. 62 cents in loose change at the bottom. The can had been his mother's and had once held Folgers and now held everything he had in the world. He put the lid back on. "Daddy?" Owen was at the top of the stairs. "There's somebody in the yard." Caleb went still. "Where?" "Out my window. On the other side of the fence. It's a lady." He climbed the stairs 2 at a time, not running, just deliberate, because Owen was watching. He went into the little bedroom and looked out the window. There was a woman in the field. She was standing at the fence where the posts leaned, a long dark coat over what looked like a house dress, boots that had seen a lot of mud, a wire basket in one hand, empty. She was looking straight at his house, not at a window, not at the truck, at the house, like she'd been standing there a while. She was too far for him to see her face clearly, but something about the way she was standing, the stillness of it, the particular way her shoulders were set, made the back of his neck prickle in a way he couldn't place. "Is that the neighbor?" Owen said. "I don't know, bud. She looks lonely." Caleb glanced down at his son. Owen's nose was about an inch from the glass. "How can you tell?" "I can just tell." He looked back out. The woman lifted her free hand and pushed her hair out of her eyes. The wind took it right back. She didn't seem to mind. "Stay here," Caleb said. "I'll be right back." "Can I come?" "Stay here. Unpack your dinosaur. I mean it." He went down the stairs and out the back door and across the yard, and he was halfway to the fence before he let himself place the shape of her shoulders, and by the time he got to the fence he already knew, and she was already smiling, a small, tired smile that wasn't quite a smile, and he still said it like a question. "Ivy?" "Hi, Caleb." "Ivy Bennett?" "Last I checked." 20 years. He stood there with his hand on the top rail of the fence and tried to stack the person in front of him on top of the girl in his memory, and the edges didn't line up, and then all of a sudden, they did. She'd been 12 the last summer he saw her. Skinny as a rail, 2 missing front teeth gone and grown back crooked, hair the color of wet straw and always in her face. She'd lived with her grandfather in the little blue house half a mile up the road, because of something with her parents that nobody had explained to him and that he hadn't, at 12, thought to ask about. They had been, for 3 summers, every summer, the only 2 children for a mile in any direction. They had built a fort out of pallets in the woods behind her grandfather's barn. They had shared a Coke bottle full of creek water and sworn on it, because neither of them could find a Bible, that they would get married when they were 22, because 22 was old. He had not thought about Ivy Bennett he tried to count, and his brain wouldn't do it, in a very long time. Her face was not the face he remembered. It was thinner. There were lines at the corners of her mouth that had been put there. He could tell at a glance, by worry, not by laughing. Her hair was darker. Her eyes were the same. Her eyes were exactly the same. "You came back," she said. Yeah. I saw the truck from the road." "I bet the whole county saw the truck from the road." She made a noise that was almost a laugh. "Maybe." A silence, a long one. He didn't know what to say, and he was angry at himself for not knowing. He had rehearsed on the drive how he was going to talk to the guy at the hardware store, how he was going to talk to the bank. He had not rehearsed Ivy Bennett. "Your mom," she started, and then stopped. "I'm sorry about your mom. I know it's been a while. When it happened, I didn't know where you were, so I couldn't." "It's okay." "It's not, but thank you." He looked down at the fence post between them. A bumblebee was crawling over the top of it. He watched it for a second. "You still out here?" he said. "I mean, you live out here still?" "I came back about 5 years ago." "Oh, my granddad's still in the blue house. I live with him now." He's alive, yeah." "I was going to ask." "He's alive." Something tightened in her face and smoothed over again fast enough that he almost missed it. "He's 89. "Jesus." "Yeah." Another silence. He realized he was still holding the fence like he might fall down without it, and he made himself let go. "I have a son," he said, because he had to say something. "I saw the little face in the window. His name is Owen. He's 6. He looks like you. He looks like his mother." He hadn't meant for it to come out that way. Ivy's eyes moved over his face, reading the thing he wasn't saying, and he watched her decide not to ask. "Well," she said, "welcome home, Caleb." "Thanks." "If you need anything, I don't." It came out harder than he meant. He saw her flinch, barely, and he put his hand up. "I'm sorry, I'm sorry. I'm tired. I just drove 12 hours. I didn't mean it like that." "It's okay. I'm fine. We're fine. I'm just here to fix the place up and sell it, and then we'll be out of your hair." She nodded, slowly. "Okay. Yeah. Okay." She turned to go. He almost let her. Then some part of him that he was going to be mad at later said, "Ivy." "Yeah? It's good to see you." She looked back over her shoulder. For a second, the tired came off her face, and what was underneath was something he had, somewhere deep, absolutely remembered. She had been a kid who laughed with her whole body. He had forgotten that until right now. "It's good to see you too, Caleb Rowan." She walked away through the field. The wire basket bumped against her leg. He stood at the fence with his hand on the post until she was a small, dark shape against the tree line, and then he went back inside to his son. Owen was sitting on the bare mattress with his dinosaur, looking at his feet. "Was it the neighbor?" "Yeah. Is she nice?" "I think so." "You were gone a long time." "I was gone like 4 minutes." "It was a long 4 minutes." Caleb sat down on the mattress next to him. The springs groaned. Owen leaned against his arm. "I knew her when I was a little kid," Caleb said. "Like my age? A little older, about 10, 11, 12. What was she like?" He tried to think of the right word. "She was brave." "Is she still brave?" "I don't know. I hope so." "Why?" He ran his hand over his son's hair. "I just hope so, bud." Ian. They went to town that evening because they had to. The pantry had a can of condensed milk from 2019 and a bag of rice that mice had found, and that was it. Caleb drove the truck into the little downtown, 3 blocks long. and he parked at the IGA and took Owen by the hand and went in with the coffee can money in his wallet, counting in his head with every item that went into the basket. Bread, peanut butter, eggs, milk, apples, a pound of ground beef, the cheap kind, a box of spaghetti, a jar of sauce, paper towels, dish soap, coffee, because he was not going to make it through this without coffee, a cheap toothbrush for Owen because the boy's old one had gotten left on the bathroom counter in the motel. $91 and change. He stood at the register and didn't flinch. He made a joke with the woman behind the counter about the price of eggs. She laughed. Owen stared at the rack of candy and didn't ask for anything, which was somehow worse than if he had. On the way to the truck, Caleb grabbed a Snickers off the rack and threw it on the pile at the last second. $1.39. For the look on his son's face when he handed it to him in the parking lot, it was the best money he had spent in a year. Owen ate it very slowly, in small bites, making it last. Daddy. Yeah. Are we poor now? Caleb kept his hands on the wheel and looked out through the windshield at the grocery store sign going pink in the sunset. We're going to be okay, bud. That's not what I asked. He looked at his son, 6 years old, chocolate on the corner of his mouth. Yeah, he said. Right now we're a little poor, but it's not going to stay that way. I promise you that. Okay. I'm going to work really hard. I know. I'm sorry. For what? He opened his mouth and closed it. There were too many answers to that question, and none of them were for a 6-year-old. For the drive, he said finally. It was a long drive. It was okay. He put the truck in gear. That night, after Owen was asleep on a made-up mattress in the little bedroom with the dinosaur under his arm, and the hallway light on because he asked for it, Caleb sat at the kitchen table with the coffee can and a legal pad and did the math. Rent, 0. That was the one thing going for him. The house was paid off. His mother had done that much. Property tax. He didn't know. He'd find out. Power. He'd had them turn it on that morning over the phone. $200 deposit. Gone. Water, same, another 100. Groceries, 91 tonight, and that was going to be twice a week at best. Gas, half a tank left, and the truck drank. Roof looked bad from the road. He'd get up there tomorrow. Furnace, he didn't know. Winter was coming. Owen's everything. He sat there for a long time with the pencil in his hand. The wind moved through the open kitchen window and stirred the curtain, and he looked up at the glass and through it, past the dark yard, saw a single yellow light on in a house down the road. Half a mile through the trees. The blue house. He looked at it for a while. Then he wrote on the legal pad, at the top, fix the porch. And under it, fix the roof. And under that, without really deciding to, don't be the kind of man who walks away again. He tore that last one off the page, balled it up, and threw it at the trash can. Missed. Went to bed. He met her grandfather 3 days later, not on purpose. He'd been on the roof since 7 in the morning with a claw hammer and a pile of shingles he'd bought on credit at the lumberyard in the next town over, where nobody knew him yet. Owen was on the porch with a coloring book and strict instructions not to come off it. Around 10:30, Caleb heard a car on the road and then, a minute later, a voice at the foot of his ladder. Hey, mister? He looked down. An old man in a plaid jacket, leaning on a cane, looking up at him with one hand shading his eyes. Yes, sir. You the Rowan boy? Yes, sir. You remember me? Caleb came down the ladder. Up close, the man was smaller than he'd been in Caleb's memory, and the skin around his eyes had gone thin as onion paper, but the eyes themselves were the same blue, sharp thing. Mr. Bennett. Hal? Hal, I'm sorry. I do remember. It's been a long time. 20 years and change. Yes, sir. Hal Bennett looked him up and down. Caleb was in work clothes with roof tar on one knee, and he felt suddenly 19 again. You look like your daddy. People tell me that. Didn't mean it as a compliment. Caleb laughed, startled. No, sir. I know you didn't. He was a son of a bitch. Yes, sir, he was. Your mama was a saint. Yes, sir. I'm sorry about your mama. Thank you. The old man looked past him at the porch, where Owen was watching them very carefully with a purple crayon paused in midair. That your boy? Yes, sir. What's his name? Owen. Owen. Hal nodded as if approving it. Good name. Plain. Plain names wear better. Yes, sir. My granddaughter tell you I was over here? No, sir, she didn't. Good. I didn't tell her I was coming. He shifted his weight on the cane. I walked. Don't tell her that either. Yes, sir. Hal looked back at him. You back for good? No, sir. I'm going to fix the place up and sell it. Huh. That a problem? Not for me. Might be for you. How's that? Hal smiled, a small, dry smile, almost apologetic. You ain't the first Rowan to come back here saying that. Your daddy said it too. Stayed 31 years. Caleb didn't answer. Nice to meet the boy, Hal said. Tell my granddaughter I said you seem all right. She'll want to know. You want me to drive you back? No. It's almost a mile. I know how far my own house is, son. He turned and started back down the driveway. Caleb watched him go. Halfway down, the old man stopped, fished a candy out of his pocket, and turned and held it up toward the porch. Boy, you like butterscotch? Owen looked at his father. Caleb nodded. Owen came carefully down the porch steps and across the yard, and Hal Bennett leaned down and pressed the candy into his hand like he was handing over something important, and said something to him that Caleb couldn't hear, and Owen nodded very seriously, and then the old man straightened up and kept walking. Owen came back to the porch with the candy in his fist. What'd he say, bud? Owen opened his hand. The butterscotch was gold in a little crinkled wrapper. He said, be good to my dad. Caleb put his hand on the side of his son's face. Owen let him. Ivy came by that evening with a casserole. She didn't knock. She stood on the porch holding a glass dish wrapped in a kitchen towel and said his name through the screen until he came out of the kitchen. You don't have to do this. I know I don't. I'm serious, Ivy. I'm serious too. It's tuna noodle. My granddad said you're probably eating peanut butter out of the jar, and I didn't want to correct him because he was mostly right. He opened the screen door. She came in and set the dish on the kitchen table like she'd been in the house before, which he realized she had a handful of times when they were kids, and his mother had fed her lemonade and cookies. He walked over here, she said. I know. He's not supposed to. I offered to drive him back. I know you did. He told me. He also told me you look like your father, which means he liked you, because if he didn't, he would have said you look like yourself. Caleb stared at her. That's how he works, she said. Okay. Are you going to let Owen eat some of this? It has broccoli in it. Kids don't always... He'll eat it. Okay. She stood in his kitchen with her hands in her coat pockets and looked around, at the peeling linoleum, the stained ceiling, the coffee can pushed up against the napkin holder. She didn't comment on any of it. He was grateful for that and furious about it at the same time. Ivy. Yeah. Why'd you really come? She looked at him. Her face was tired, the way it had been tired across the fence, and under the tired was something else. Something careful and a little bit afraid. He didn't know yet what the afraid was about. He wouldn't know for 3 more weeks. Because when I was 12 years old, she said, you gave me your sandwich at lunch every day for a whole summer, and you never said why, and I knew why, and I never said thank you. So I figured I had 20 years of thank yous saved up, and I might as well start. He couldn't look at her for a second. It was a peanut butter sandwich, he said. It was 2 peanut butter sandwiches. You used to eat the crust of yours and give me the middle. I did? Yes, Caleb, you did. He sat down at the kitchen table. She stayed standing. I didn't remember that. I know you didn't. I didn't remember a lot of things. I know. He looked up at her. The kitchen light was bad and made everything yellow. The tuna noodle smelled like the inside of his mother's house from 20 years ago, and he didn't know if she'd made it on purpose like that or if it was just how tuna noodles smelled. Ivy, don't. Don't what? Don't apologize for being 12. I won't know what to do with it. Okay. Eat the casserole. Bring the dish back when you're done. Don't wash it. I have a specific way. Tell your boy there's a cookie in the foil on top. There's a cookie? There's a cookie. Ivy. Good night, Caleb. She went out. The screen door ticked shut behind her. He sat at the table for a long time before he peeled back the foil. There was a cookie on top. Chocolate chip wrapped in a napkin. He took it upstairs to Owen, who was already in his pajamas reading the dinosaur book he'd read 16 times before, and handed it to him without a word. Where'd this come from? The neighbor. The lonely lady? Caleb thought about that. I don't think she's lonely, he said. I think she's just tired. Owen considered this with the gravity he brought to all important matters. Okay, he said. Can I have it? Yes. Owen ate the cookie in careful small bites, the way he had eaten the Snickers. When he was done, he brushed the crumbs off his pajamas and looked up. Daddy. Yeah. I'm glad we came here. Caleb didn't trust his voice. He nodded. Me too, bud. He sat with his son until the boy fell asleep. Downstairs, on the kitchen table, the casserole was still warm. He ate standing up at the counter, straight out of the dish with a fork, in the dark, and when he was done, he washed the fork and went out on the sagging porch and stood looking down the road at the single yellow light in the blue house half a mile through the trees. It was still on. He watched it until, at some point close to midnight, it went out. Then he went inside, took the legal pad off the table, and under "Fix the porch and fix the roof," he wrote, in letters he tried to keep from pressing too hard into the paper, "Find out what's wrong." He didn't write whose house he meant. He didn't have to. The light in the blue house came on again at 4:30 in the morning. Caleb saw it because he was already awake. He had been awake since 3, sitting at the kitchen table with the legal pad in front of him and the coffee can at his elbow, running the same numbers he'd run the night before and getting the same answer he'd gotten the night before, which was not enough. He had stopped pretending the math would change. He was just running it now the way a man runs his tongue over a sore tooth. The window over the sink faced the road. He looked up, and there it was. A yellow square through the trees, half a mile off, small and steady. 4:30. He thought about Ivy standing at his fence in that oversized coat. He thought about Hal Bennett shuffling down the driveway with his cane. He thought about the tuna noodle and the cookie on top, and he thought about the careful tired in Ivy's face, the kind of tired that didn't come from one bad night. 4:30 in the morning, 89-year-old grandfather, a granddaughter who came to other people's houses with food she couldn't afford to give away, in a coat 3 sizes too big because she'd probably got it from a church bin. He put the pencil down. He didn't go over there. It wasn't his business. He sat at his own kitchen table and drank cold coffee out of a cup that had belonged to his mother, and watched that yellow square, until, at some point after 5, a second light came on beside it, and then, at 5:45, both of them went out at once. By 6:15, he was on his own porch with his coat on, waiting for the sky to give him enough light to work by. He worked hard that day, and he worked harder the next. The roof took him 4 days. He did the worst patches first, the ones where the last storm had come through and rotted the decking underneath, and for those he had to pull up rotten plywood and cut new pieces to fit, with a circular saw he'd bought used from a man in a barn off Route 9 for $40 cash. He shingled over what he'd cut and ran a bead of tar along the seams and went back down the ladder at dusk with his shoulders burning and his hands stiff. Owen met him at the bottom of the ladder every evening with a glass of water and the same question. Did you fix it? More of it. All of it? Not yet. Tomorrow? Maybe tomorrow. Owen nodded as if he'd been given a schedule and filed it away. Ivy came by on the 3rd day with another dish. This one was a chicken pot pie in a pan that looked like it had been used for exactly that purpose for 30 years. She didn't stay. She set it on the porch railing, said "eat it hot," and walked off before he could argue with her. He watched her go down the driveway and stand for a second at the end of it, looking both ways up the road like she was checking for something, and then she cut across the field toward home. He came down off the roof and ate the pot pie with Owen at the kitchen table, and couldn't taste much of it because the back of his mind was somewhere else. "It's good," Owen said. "Yeah." "Daddy, the lady left another cookie." "Where?" "Under the foil. Look." He lifted the foil. There was a cookie, oatmeal raisin this time, wrapped in a napkin. Under the napkin, folded twice, was a piece of paper. Caleb unfolded it. It was a note, in handwriting that was neat and a little slanted, the way a teacher would write. "Granddad says thank you for not embarrassing him about the walk. He won't say it himself." Caleb read it twice. Then he folded it again and put it in his shirt pocket and finished the pot pie without tasting it. That night he went back up on the roof, even though it was dark, because he couldn't sleep. He worked by the light of a work lamp on an extension cord until it got too cold to feel his fingers, and he came down, and he stood in the yard and looked through the trees at the blue house. The light was on again. He stood there in the cold for a long time. In the morning, he drove to town and went to the hardware store, and while he was paying for a bundle of 2x4s, he asked the man behind the counter casually if there was any construction work going in the area. The man had a gray mustache and eyes that were used to reading people. "Depends," he said. "You looking to be a hand or a boss?" "A hand." "You know framing?" "Some." "You know roofing?" "Been doing my own all week." "You got a truck?" "I got a truck." The man reached under the counter and came up with a pencil and the back of a receipt. He wrote a name and a number. "Dale Mercer, runs a crew out of Ashland. He's always looking. He won't ask you many questions and he won't pay you much, but he'll pay you Friday." "Thank you." "Don't thank me. Wait till you've worked a day for him." Caleb folded the receipt into his wallet next to Ivy's note and went out to the truck. He called Dale Mercer from the parking lot. Dale answered on the third ring with a voice that sounded like gravel in a coffee can. "Mercer. My name's Caleb Rowan. Guy at the hardware store said you might need hands. You sober?" "Yes, sir." "You lazy?" "No, sir." "You show up at 6? "I'll show up at 5:30. 5:30's showing off. 6 is fine. Don't be late." "You late once, don't come back. You got boots?" "Yes, sir." "Ashland, corner of Pike and 4th. Tomorrow. I'll pay you cash end of day till I decide you're worth a check." "Yes, sir." The line clicked off. Caleb sat in the truck and exhaled slowly. Then he drove home. That night, after Owen was asleep, he walked over to the blue house. He hadn't planned on it. He hadn't even admitted to himself on the drive home that he was going to do it. But at 8 o'clock, when Owen was snoring softly under the dinosaur blanket and the house was quiet, he put on his jacket and walked down his own driveway and up the road. The blue house had gotten smaller. That was his first thought. Houses always got smaller when you came back to them. He knew that. But this one had gotten smaller in a way that wasn't just perspective. The porch was leaning, the shutters were crooked, the yard was a yard the way his own yard had been a yard a week ago, which was to say it was something else that had started as a yard and given up. The yellow light was on in the kitchen window. He stood at the end of her driveway for a full minute. Then he made himself walk up it. He knocked on the side door because that was the door people in the country actually used. Ivy opened it in 2 seconds flat, like she'd been standing right there, which she probably had been. Her face went through something when she saw him. Surprise, and under it, fast, a flicker of something that looked almost like panic. Then she smoothed it away. "Caleb, I'm sorry it's late." "It's not late. It's late enough I should have called, but I don't have your number." "I don't have yours either." He stood there on her back step with his hands in his pockets. "Is Owen okay?" she said. "Owen's asleep." "Okay. Can I come in for a second?" A pause, a real one, long enough that he knew the answer was going to be tricky before she gave it. "It's kind of a bad time," she said. "Okay, I can come back." "No." She closed her eyes for a second. When she opened them, something in her had decided. "No, come in. Wipe your feet." He wiped his feet and stepped into the kitchen, and he understood the pause as soon as he was over the threshold. The kitchen had been nice once, in the way country kitchens are nice. Yellow curtains, a round table with mismatched chairs, a linoleum floor that had been new in about 1978, and had been cleaned by somebody who cared about it ever since. But on the table, where you'd put a flower vase or a fruit bowl, there was a stack of envelopes. Maybe 2 dozen. All of them had been opened and refolded, and all of them had red on them somewhere. Red ink, red stickers, red lettering along the margin. Past due. Final notice. Second notice. He looked at the pile before he could stop himself. He looked up at her. Ivy's jaw was set. "I was paying bills," she said. "Ivy. Don't." "I didn't say anything." "You looked something." "I'm sorry. I won't look anything." She turned her back to him and put the kettle on the stove as if nothing in the room needed explaining. Her shoulders were tight under the flannel shirt. "You want coffee?" "Sure." "It's instant. Don't get excited." "I'm not excited." "Sit down." He sat. Not at the table with the envelopes. At a small wooden chair by the back wall where she'd cleared space on a side table for a cup. The house smelled like an old house, wood smoke and something medical underneath it. A thin chemical note he recognized from hospitals and that he couldn't quite place. A door down the hallway was shut, and from behind it he could hear very faintly a rhythmic mechanical sound. Puff, pause, puff, pause. A machine. Ivy saw him notice. She handed him the coffee. Oxygen concentrator, she said. He's on it at night. How bad is he? He's 89. That's not an answer. I know it isn't. She sat down across from him with her own coffee. She wrapped both hands around the mug like she was cold, even though the kitchen was warm. He has COPD, she said, and his heart isn't great. He's had 2 small strokes since I moved back. They're not going to get bigger, they're going to get more of them. That's what the doctor said. Not bigger, more. Ivy, if the power goes out for more than about 6 hours, he's in trouble. He looked at the envelopes again before he could stop himself. He couldn't help it. Yes, she said, following his eyes. Including the electric bill. How far behind? I'm not telling you that, Ivy. Caleb, I'm not telling you that. You've been back 8 days and you've got a kid and a coffee can full of cash on your kitchen table and I'm not going to... You saw the coffee can. I saw the coffee can. When? The night I brought the casserole. Don't be embarrassed. My granddad used to keep one exactly like it. It's a country thing. He laughed once without meaning to. It came out rough. Okay. Okay. They sat. The oxygen machine went puff, pause, puff, pause. I got a job, he said, to say something. Where? Construction crew out of Ashland. Start tomorrow. Framing? Whatever they tell me to do. She nodded. She didn't say good or I'm glad or any of the things people usually said. She just nodded, like she was filing the information. I'm still going to fix my house and sell it, he said. That's still the plan. Okay. I'm telling you because you don't have to tell me anything. I know I don't. He set the coffee cup down. He looked at her across the small cleared space between them. Ivy, I want to ask you something, and I want you not to be mad. I'll try. Who do you owe? She didn't answer. I'm not asking how much. I'm asking who. Caleb? Is it the bank? It's not the bank. Then who? A muscle moved in her jaw. A man named Roy Calder, she said. He runs a financing office in Millbrook. He bought my granddad's original note off the bank about 6 years ago, before I moved home. I didn't know until I got here that it had been sold. Calder. You don't know him. He wasn't here when we were kids. He's from somewhere else. Came into town about 10 years ago. Owns half the storefronts in Millbrook now. And you're behind with him. I'm behind with everyone. He's the one that matters. Why him? She looked down into her coffee. Because if I don't pay him the October payment by the 31st, he can start the paperwork to take the house. Caleb's stomach did something cold. How much is the October payment? Caleb. How much? $2,200. He was quiet. And I have, she said, and then laughed. The short, dry laugh of a person laughing so they don't cry. I have $410 in a mayonnaise jar in the cabinet over the stove. Ivy, don't. I know what you've got. I saw your coffee can. Don't. I didn't tell you so you'd empty it out. I told you because you asked, and I'm tired of lying to people about it. I wasn't going to empty it out. Then don't offer me anything. I'm not offering you anything yet. Yet. She set her mug down hard enough that coffee came over the rim. She didn't wipe it up. Caleb Rowan, she said, I'm going to say this one time. You came back here 8 days ago to fix up a house and sell it and get out. That is what you said to me at the fence. That is the plan. You have a little boy who doesn't need to watch his daddy sink another ship. You keep your money in your can. I will figure this out. I have been figuring this out for 5 years without you, and I will figure it out for however long it takes. That's not... It is, though. Ivy. What? When I was 12 years old, you gave me half a peach out of your lunch every single day from April to June because my daddy drank that whole spring and my mama forgot to pack me any fruit. Don't think I don't remember. She was quiet for a second. You said you didn't remember. I remembered when you said the sandwich thing. It came back. What else came back? He looked at her. The kitchen light caught the side of her face and made a line of her jaw and a hollow under her eye. A lot, he said. Not all of it, but a lot. Okay. Okay. The oxygen machine breathed behind the door. Puff. Pause. He wants to meet the boy, Ivy said after a minute. Hal? He already met him, the candy day. He meant formally. He said, her mouth turned up a little at the corner. He said to tell you to bring him over for Sunday supper. Sunday supper. That's what he said, Sunday supper. I can't come empty-handed. You can come empty-handed. I can't come empty-handed, Ivy. Fine. Bring a jar of jam off your mama's pantry shelf. She used to put up peach. There's still some. I guarantee it. She made 24 jars a summer. How do you know that? Because she gave me 2 a summer. He sat with that. Okay, he said. Sunday supper. Sunday at 5. Okay. He stood up. She stood up. At the door with his hand on the handle, he stopped. Ivy. Yeah. The light on at 4:30 in the morning. Her face closed up. You watching my house, Caleb Rowan? I can see it from my kitchen window. I'm not watching it. I just see it. She let out a long breath. He has bad nights. Sometimes he can't breathe lying down. I get up and sit with him in the chair. We turn on the lamp and I read to him until he falls asleep. What do you read? Whatever's on the table, the Farmer's Almanac, a cookbook, one time. Last week it was a Louis L'Amour. You read him a Louis L'Amour at 4 in the morning. Chapter 11. He wanted to know what happened. He said if he was going to go, he at least wanted to know how the horse got across the river. Caleb made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh. It came out wrong, and she saw, and she pretended she didn't. Good night, Caleb. Good night, Ivy. He walked home in the dark, and the road was empty, and the stars were very bright, and he didn't look up at them once, because if he did, he was going to come apart. And he couldn't come apart, because Owen was asleep in the little room over the porch and was going to need breakfast in 8 hours. He got home and sat on his porch step in the cold and did the math again. 1,116 minus groceries, minus shingles, minus the saw, minus the power deposit, minus the water deposit, minus gas. $418. And Friday was 3 days away. He put his face in his hands and sat there for a long time. Then he went inside and set 2 alarms and went to bed. He was on the corner of Pike and 4th at 5:45 in the morning. Dale Mercer pulled up at 5:58 in a Ford F350, with a crew cab and rust around both wheel wells. He looked Caleb up and down through the window, taking in the boots, the gloves in the back pocket, the thermos. He grunted once and jerked his head toward the passenger side. Get in. Caleb got in. There were 2 other men in the back, a guy named Reuben, who looked Caleb's age, and a kid called Bucky, maybe 20. Neither of them said much. Bucky nodded. Reuben tipped his coffee cup a 1/4 inch. Rowan, Dale said to the windshield, you any relation to Walt Rowan? My daddy. Huh. They drove. The job was a subdivision outside Ashland. 4 spec houses a developer was putting up on a cleared hillside. Dale's crew was doing the framing on units 3 and 4. Caleb carried lumber for the first 2 hours because that was what you gave the new guy. And then Dale came over and watched him nail off a wall sheathing for about 3 minutes, and then said, You done this before? Yes, sir. Where? Summers in college. College for what? Business. Dale made a noise that could have meant anything. You frame then. Bucky'll carry. Bucky, 10 feet away, made a face but didn't argue. Caleb framed. His hands remembered it before his head did. The rhythm came back, measure, mark, cut, nail, measure, mark, cut, nail. By noon, his shoulders were on fire, and by 3, his lower back had moved past pain into a kind of numb hum. And when they broke at 5:30, Dale came over with a roll of bills and counted out 12 20s into Caleb's palm. Good work. Thank you. Monday? Yes, sir. 6. Yes, sir. Caleb drove home at the dark with $240 in his pocket and the heater in the truck blowing lukewarm air on his knees. He stopped at the IGA and bought a rotisserie chicken and a bag of pre-made salad and a gallon of milk. He stopped at the drugstore and bought a bottle of ibuprofen for himself and a roll of colored pencils for Owen, because Owen had been using the same 4 crayons for a week, and 2 of them were down to nubs. He got home at 6:40. Owen was at the front window watching for him. When Caleb came up the porch, the boy opened the door before he could get to it. "Where were you?" "Working, bud." "All day?" "Yeah." "I thought you were working on the roof." "Different kind of working." Owen looked at him. At the dirt on his jeans, at the sawdust in his hair. "You're sweaty." "I know." "You smell bad." "I know." "I made you a card, in case you didn't come back." That one got him. He had to turn and set the grocery bag on the table before he answered. "I'm always coming back, Owen." "Always." "I know, but just in case." The card was on the kitchen table, a folded piece of computer paper, drawn on in the old crayons. 2 stick figures, one tall and one short, holding hands. In Owen's wobbly block letters, "I love you, Dad, come home." Caleb held it for a long time. "Come help me with the chicken," he said finally. "Okay." They ate at the table with the card propped up against the salt shaker. Afterward, Caleb ran a bath for Owen, and while Owen was in the bath, Caleb sat on the hallway floor with his back against the wall and his eyes closed. He almost fell asleep sitting up. He caught himself with a jerk and stood up and checked on the boy. "Hot enough?" "Yeah." 5 more minutes." "Okay." He went back downstairs to the kitchen and put the coffee can on the table and put the 1220s in it, one at a time, smoothing each one flat. Then he took out the legal pad and he wrote, under, "Don't be the kind of man who walks away again," which he had, after all, not thrown away. He had written it again in the morning and then crossed it out and then written it again. He wrote one word, Calder. He looked at it. He underlined it. Then he ate 2 ibuprofen dry and went upstairs and got his son out of the bathtub and put him to bed. On Sunday, at 4:45, Caleb and Owen walked up the road to the Blue House with a jar of peach jam, exactly as predicted, and a package of dinner rolls from the IGA because a jar of jam felt too thin by itself. Owen wore his one clean shirt. Caleb wore his one clean shirt. The jar of jam was 1997 or thereabouts, based on the faded handwriting on the lid. But the jam was fine. He'd opened it that afternoon and tasted it with a spoon, and it was fine. His mother had been a careful woman. Hal Bennett opened the door himself, leaning hard on his cane, and did not say hello. He said, "You brought the boy. Good. Come in, don't stand in the air." The house was warmer than it had been on Tuesday night. Ivy had made a pot roast. The smell of it hit them in the front hall, and Owen, who had been quiet all the way up the road, took an audible breath. "That smells good." "It smells." "That's my girl," Hal said. "She can cook. She got it from her grandmother, not from me. I could burn water." He led them, slowly, toward the kitchen. "Son, what's your name again?" "Owen." "Owen, you like pot roast?" "I don't know." "Honest answer. I respect that. You'll know in 10 minutes." Ivy was at the stove. She had put on a different shirt, a green one, and done something to her hair, and Caleb noticed and tried not to let her see that he noticed. She turned, and her face was a little pink from the heat, and she said, "You're on time." 5 o'clock. "Granddad said you'd be early." "He said that?" "He said he'll be 15 minutes early because he doesn't want us to think he's rude." Caleb checked his watch. It was 4:48. "I stood at the end of the driveway for 10 minutes, he admitted. Hal, lowering himself into a chair at the head of the table, cackled. It turned into a cough. Ivy watched him through it without moving, and when it was done, turned back to the stove as if nothing had happened. They ate. The pot roast was better than good. The rolls were warm because Ivy had put them in the oven as soon as they'd walked in. Owen had seconds without being asked, which was the first time in 3 months he'd had seconds of anything, and Ivy saw it before Caleb did and looked at Caleb across the table with a small, careful smile that he didn't know what to do with. Hal ate slowly. He asked Owen what grade he was in. Owen said first. Hal asked what his favorite subject was. Owen said recess. Hal said that was the correct answer, and he respected a man who gave the correct answer. Owen grinned for the first time in days. After supper, Ivy took Owen out to the back porch to show him a barn cat that had been living under the steps, and Hal and Caleb were left at the table with the pot roast bones. Hal took his time. He pushed his plate a little away from him. He folded his napkin. Then he looked up. You know about Calder? Caleb's hand tightened on his fork before he could stop it. She told me some. How much? The October payment. The house. Not all of it, then. No, sir. Hal nodded slowly. I'm going to tell you the rest, he said, because I'm 89 and I don't have the luxury of being delicate. Sir, Roy Calder is a crook. I'm not using that word lightly, and I'm not using it because I don't like him. He is a crook. He bought my note off the bank when I had one bad year, in 19, and he's been adjusting the interest on it ever since with a pencil and a spreadsheet, and the assumption that I'm too old to notice and my granddaughter's too tired to fight. He's got 3 or 4 families in this town in the same situation, the Myers, the Caldwells, the Pattersons, before they moved to Mobile. Why hasn't anyone? Because he's careful. Because the paperwork he's got us sign looks legal enough. Because my granddaughter works 2 jobs and doesn't sleep and doesn't have the hours to go sit in a county clerk's office for 3 days straight, which is what it'd take. Caleb was quiet. I used to have a lawyer, Hal said. Fella up in Ashland. He died 2 years ago. I haven't had the strength to find a new one. Does Ivy know how bad it is? She knows some of it. She doesn't know all of it. I haven't told her about the Myers and the Caldwells. She's got enough. Why are you telling me? Hal looked at him across the table. The old blue eyes were very sharp and very tired. Because you showed up. Sir, no, let me finish. You showed up. You walked over here at 8 o'clock at night on a Tuesday to check on my granddaughter, and you saw the bills on the table, and you didn't pretend you didn't. That's more than the last 6 men who came through this road have done. I don't care what you planned to do when you drove up to that house. I care what you do now. And right now, what I'm asking you to do is keep your eyes open. I'm not going to be here long, Mr. Bennett. I didn't ask you to be here long. I asked you to keep your eyes open while you are. Yes, sir. And if you ever ask my granddaughter to marry you, you're going to have to ask me first, because I'm the only family she's got, and I'm not going anywhere just yet. Caleb nearly choked on his water. Sir, I'm not. I didn't say now. I said if. Settle down. Mr. Bennett. Hal, I'm 2 years divorced. I know you are. I'm not. I'm not in any kind of shape to... I know you aren't. I'm just letting you know the rule. So when the time comes, you don't forget it. Caleb set his water glass down very carefully. Yes, sir, he said. Good. On the back porch, through the window, he could see Ivy crouched down by the steps pointing at something under them, and Owen on his knees next to her, both of them very still the way you had to be still to let a cat come out, and a small gray shape moving slowly toward them from under the boards. Owen had his hand out. Ivy was whispering something. The cat bumped its head against Owen's knuckles, and Owen turned and looked up at Ivy with his face open and amazed, the way a 6-year-old's face opens when something small and good happens, and Ivy laughed. A real laugh, not a tired one, and put her hand on the top of Owen's head the way you do with a child you have loved for years, and Owen leaned into it. Caleb watched them through the glass. Hal was watching him watch them. Neither of them said anything for a long time. Pot roast was good, Caleb said finally. She gets it from her grandmother. You said? Worth saying twice. They sat in the warm kitchen while outside on the porch, a 6-year-old boy and a 29-year-old woman crouched together in the lamplight and let a half-feral cat decide whether or not to trust them. The oxygen concentrator down the hall was silent for now. The envelopes with their red lettering were in the drawer where Ivy had pushed them that afternoon so they wouldn't be on the table during supper. Caleb. Yes, sir. October 31st is 13 days. I know. I ain't telling you to fix it. I'm telling you what day it is. Yes, sir. All right. Hal pushed himself up with both hands on the table. The cane was leaning against his chair. He took it and shuffled to the back door and opened it and said, in a voice much bigger than the one he'd used at the table, Girl, bring that boy inside before he freezes to death. I've got pie. There's pie? Owen said from the porch. Of course there's pie. They came in. The cat didn't. Owen's cheeks were red from the cold, and his eyes were shining, and he said, Her name is Mittens, with the air of a man who had just named a planet. Ivy followed him in and closed the door behind them, and she caught Caleb's eye for 1 second over the top of Owen's head, and whatever passed between them in that second was quick and quiet and not for anyone else in the room. They ate pie. They drove home at 7:30 in the truck because Caleb decided the walk in the cold was too much for Owen after the long afternoon, and Owen fell asleep with his head on Caleb's arm before they'd gone a quarter mile. Caleb pulled into his own driveway and sat there for a minute with his son asleep against him, and the porch light he'd left on burning yellow through the trees the way Ivy's did, and the coffee can full of honest hard money on the kitchen table inside, and the word Calder on the legal pad next to it, underlined, 13 days. He carried Owen in and up the stairs and laid him down in the little room over the porch, and the boy rolled onto his side and pulled the dinosaur under his chin without waking up. Caleb stood in the doorway for a minute, watching him breathe. Then he went down to the kitchen, and he did not sit at the table. He went to the phone on the wall, a cream-colored rotary that had been his mother's and that he had, a week ago, been surprised still worked. And he picked up the receiver and he dialed the number on the back of the receipt from the hardware store. And when Dale Mercer answered on the fourth ring, Caleb said, "Hey, it's Rowan. I need to ask you something." "You quitting on me already?" "No, sir. Opposite. I was wondering if you got any weekend work." A pause on the line. "How bad do you need it?" "Bad." "How bad is bad?" 13 days bad. Another pause. Longer. "Saturdays," Dale said. 6 to 6. Cash. Different site. I do remodels private on Saturdays. It's uglier work. Crawl spaces, tear-outs. Pays better. I'll take it. You got a kid, right? Yes, sir. Where's he going to be? Caleb opened his mouth and closed it. I'll figure it out. Figure it out before Saturday or don't come. I'm not watching you show up exhausted with a 6-year-old in the cab of your truck. Yes, sir. Saturday, same corner, 6. Thank you. Don't thank me. Dale hung up. Caleb held the receiver for another second before he set it back on the cradle. Through the kitchen window, he could see, through the trees, the yellow light come on in the blue house. 10 o'clock. Hal was going to bed. The light was on in the back bedroom now, not the kitchen. He could tell by the color of it through the maples. Ivy was probably getting the old man hooked up to the concentrator, the way she did every night, the way she had been doing every night for 5 years alone. He stood at the window with his hand on the cold glass. 13 days. He turned off the kitchen light and went upstairs to bed. He figured it out before Saturday. He called Ivy on Thursday evening from the kitchen phone and his voice came out stiffer than he meant it to. Ivy, it's Caleb. I know it's Caleb. Nobody else has my number. Right. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. I need to ask you something and I want you to say no if it's too much. Okay. He took a breath. I'm picking up Saturdays with the crew, 6 to 6. I need somebody to watch Owen. I can pay. What? No. Ivy. I said no. Not to watching Owen. To the paying. Bring him at 5:45 Saturday morning. I'll feed him breakfast. Granddad will be awake by 6 anyway. He doesn't sleep past 5:30 a day in his life. Ivy, I can't. Caleb Rowan, I'm going to hang up if you keep going. Okay. Okay. Thank you. Bring him a change of clothes, in case of spills. We have a cat now. She hung up. He stood there with his hand on the receiver for a second, and then he laughed. A short, real laugh, alone in the kitchen, and it surprised him how much it hurt the muscles in his chest to laugh. Saturday morning, he dropped Owen off at 5:45 with a backpack and the dinosaur. Owen walked into the blue house like he'd been doing it all his life, which broke something in Caleb's chest on a small scale he tried not to feel. Ivy was in the kitchen already, in the same oversized coat over pajama pants, frying bacon. Hal was at the table with the newspaper, wearing reading glasses and a cardigan buttoned wrong. Boy, Hal said without looking up. Sit down. You like your eggs scrambled or broken? Scrambled. Smart. Caleb stood in the doorway feeling useless. Go, Ivy said, not turning from the stove. You're gonna be late. I'll be back by 7. We'll be here. Thank you. Go. He went. The Saturday site was a house out on the county road, a ranch from the 60s whose owner had decided, 10 years too late, to gut it. Dale's crew was tearing out a bathroom and a kitchen down to the studs, and Caleb spent 6 hours in a crawl space with a headlamp and a pry bar pulling up subflooring that had rotted through under a leaking shower pan. At noon, he crawled out covered in insulation dust with his eyes swollen half shut from it, and Dale handed him a bottle of water and said, 10-minute break. You're doing good. Thanks. You ever fight? What? Professionally? No. You move like somebody who did. I had an angry father. Huh. Dale walked off. Reuben, who was eating a sandwich on the tailgate of the truck, raised his eyebrows at Caleb. That's the nicest thing he said to anybody since April. He said I move like somebody who got hit a lot. Yeah, that's Dale being nice. Caleb drank the water in one long pull. He sat on the tailgate next to Reuben and closed his eyes. You got kids? Reuben said. 1. How old? 6. That why you're working Saturdays? Part of why. What's the other part? Caleb opened his eyes. Reuben was looking at him with a face that wasn't curious. It was the face of a man who had done his own Saturdays for his own reasons and recognized another one. Woman, Caleb said finally. Yeah. Not my woman, just a woman. Close enough. They went back inside. He got back to the Blue House at 7:10 that night, and he was so tired he had to sit in the truck for a minute before he could get out. His hands were swollen. His knees ached. He had a splinter in the web of his right hand that he was going to have to dig out with a needle. He went in through the back door because that was the door now. The kitchen smelled like soup. Owen was at the table with a crayon and a piece of butcher paper, drawing something enormous and purple. Hal was on the couch in the next room with his feet up, asleep with a newspaper over his face. Ivy was at the sink washing a pot, sleeves pushed up to her elbows, and she turned when he came in and her face did something small and glad that she smoothed away almost fast enough. You look terrible, she said. I know. Sit down before you fall down. I will. He sat. Owen came around the table without looking up from his drawing and climbed into his lap and went on drawing from there without missing a stroke. Caleb put his chin on the top of his son's head and closed his eyes. I made too much soup, Ivy said to the sink. I was going to send some home with you. Or you could eat it here. Here. Okay. If that's all right. I said okay, Caleb. She set a bowl in front of him. Chicken and dumplings. Thick, the kind with the actual flat strips of dough cut by hand. He hadn't eaten a real bowl of chicken and dumplings since his mother had made them. The smell of it hit the back of his throat before the taste did, and he had to blink, hard, twice, before he picked up the spoon. Daddy? Yeah. Mittens let me hold her. Did she? For 4 minutes. That's a long time. Ivy said the first time she held her it took 6 weeks. So I'm faster. You're faster than Ivy. Yeah, but I had help. From who? Ivy. Caleb laughed. It came out thick. Ivy, at the sink, didn't turn around, but her shoulders moved like she was smiling. He paid her 3 weeks later. Not in money. She wouldn't take money. He paid her in labor. He spent a Sunday afternoon on her roof patching the same kinds of holes he'd patched on his own. He spent an evening on her porch with a sledgehammer, pulling off the rotten railings and stacking them in the yard to burn. He fixed the gutter that had come off over her kitchen door. He put a new handle on the screen. He fixed the loose board on her back step that Hal had complained about twice and not done anything about because Hal, as he put it, wasn't 26 anymore. She let him do all of it. She stood in the yard with a cup of coffee and watched him work. And she said once, on the evening he came down off her roof at dusk, "You're going to kill yourself." I'm fine. You're working 60 hours a week on a crew and spending Sundays on my roof. I'm fine, Ivy. You have a son. He's right there. Owen was in the yard with Mittens in his lap. You know what I mean. He did know what she meant. He didn't answer. Caleb? Yeah. Why are you doing this? He was still on the ladder. He came down 2 rungs so his face was level with hers. Up close, in the low gold light, the tired in her eyes was worse than it had been, and he understood suddenly that she hadn't been sleeping either. That whatever he was doing to himself, she was matching. Because, he said, when I was 12 years old, you gave me half a peach every day for 3 months. And I never said thank you, and I've got 20 years of thank yous to pay off, and I figure the roof is about 3 of them. Caleb? What? Don't make a joke right now. Okay. Tell me why. He was quiet for a second. Because I don't know how to sit in that house at night and know you're down the road and not come help, he said. That's the real answer. I don't have a better one. She didn't say anything. I'm not asking for anything back, he said. I know you aren't. I just can't sit still. I know. So let me. She looked at him. Okay, she said. He went back up the ladder. He paid Calder on the 29th. He did it himself. He didn't tell Ivy. He took the truck to Millbrook on his lunch break, which he didn't have, and he stood in line at the financing office at the corner of Main and Elm with $240 of Saturday money in an envelope in his jacket pocket. And he listened to the woman at the window ahead of him pay $86 on a payday loan and apologize for being late. And he watched the teller, a thin woman with a gold cross around her neck and tired eyes of her own, say, "It's all right, honey," without meaning it. When he got to the window, he said, "I need to make a payment on account for Harold Bennett." The teller looked up. "You family?" "Friend." "I can take a payment from anybody. Just need the account number." He gave her the number Ivy had written on the back of an envelope and left on his truck seat 2 nights ago without telling him she was going to, which had been her way of saying, if you're going to do it, you're going to do it with my blessing and the right number. The teller typed. She frowned. She typed again. "How much are you paying?" "How much is owed?" "The October payment is $2,200, but there's a what?" "There's a late fee assessed on the 19th of $340. "On what basis?" The teller looked at him, not unkindly. "Sir, I just worked the window. Can I see the statement?" "I'm not allowed to." "Is Mr. Calder in?" "He's in the back." "Can I see him?" She hesitated. Then she picked up a phone. Roy Calder came out of the back 2 minutes later. He was shorter than Caleb had expected. 50, maybe, with a thick head of silver hair combed straight back and a gold watch that was just slightly too big for his wrist. He wore a sport coat over a golf shirt, and he walked like a man who had decided some years ago that other people's time was less valuable than his. "Help you?" "I'm paying on the Bennett account." "Oh?" Calder's eyes ran over Caleb's jeans, his boots, the sawdust still in the cuff. "You a relation?" "Friend." What's the name?" "Rowan. Caleb Rowan." Something moved in Calder's face, just a flicker, there and gone. "Any relation to Walt Rowan?" "My father." "Oh. Why?" "I bought a parcel off your father about 9 years ago, before he passed. Good man." "He wasn't." Calder smiled, thin. "Well, business was business. I'm paying the October payment. The October payment plus the late fee is $2,540. It's not the 19th yet." "No, sir, it's the 29th. I mean, the payment wasn't due till the 31st. "How did you assess a late fee on the 19th? "Different clause in the contract." "Can I see it?" "It's in the account agreement Mr. Bennett signed." "Can I see it?" Calder looked at him for a long second. "I'll need an authorization from Mr. Bennett." "I'll get it." "Do that then. I'm paying $2,200 today. Late fee stays." "Okay." "Okay." Caleb counted out $2,200 on the counter. 240 of it was Saturday cash, limp and folded in 10s and 20s. The rest was money he had withdrawn that morning from a checking account with exactly $136 left in it after. He had emptied the coffee can 3 days ago into the bank so he could write the check, and he had walked out of the bank feeling like a man who had just cut off his own hand and was trying to pretend otherwise. He took the receipt. He folded it. He put it in his wallet. "Tell Mr. Bennett I said hello," Calder said. "I won't." Calder laughed. "Have a good day, Mr. Rowan." Caleb walked out. He sat in his truck in the parking lot for a minute before he drove. He didn't cry. He was not a man who cried about money. But he put his forehead down on the steering wheel for a second, and he pressed it there hard enough to leave a mark, because the late fee was not in the contract. He was almost sure of it. He had no way of proving it yet. But the flicker on Calder's face had told him what his gut had already told him, which was that Hal Bennett had been right. The man was a crook, and the crookedness was deeper than one late fee, and somewhere in this was a paper trail that somebody could follow if they had the time. And he didn't have the time. He had 10 days before the 31st now, which didn't matter anymore because he just paid it, which meant he had 1 month. 1 month before the next payment, 1 month to find whatever was wrong. He sat up. He drove back to the site. He did not tell Ivy that night. He did not tell her the next night. He put the receipt in his wallet and he waited until Hal came over to his house on Tuesday. A thing Hal had started doing, walking over in the afternoons when the weather was decent, with his cane and a thermos of coffee and the stated purpose of keeping Caleb company while he worked, but the actual purpose, Caleb had figured out, of getting out of the house so Ivy could sleep for an hour without worrying about him. Hal sat on the porch step. Caleb was on his knees working on the same porch a few feet away, fitting a new board where he'd pulled up a rotten one. "I paid Calder," Caleb said, not looking up. Hal was quiet. "Sunday before last. $2,200. There was a late fee he tacked on that I didn't pay. I'm almost sure it's not in your contract." "It's not." "Can I see your contract?" "Yes." "I need a signed piece of paper from you saying he can show it to me." "I'll write it tonight. You'll want to read it yourself first, out loud, with Ivy." "I've read it." "Read it out loud. With her. There's stuff in there you're going to want her to hear from your mouth, not mine." "Ivy know you paid it." "No, sir." "She's going to find out." "I know she is." "You want me to tell her?" "I take it as a kindness." Hal took a long, slow sip of his coffee and looked out at the field. "Son," he said, "what's the game plan here?" "I don't have one. I've got a month." "That's not what I meant." Caleb put the hammer down. He sat back on his heels. "Sir? Don't sir me. You know what I'm asking. I'm going to find whatever Calder's hiding, and I'm going to drag it into the light, and I'm not going to let him take your house. That's not a plan. That's a feeling. It's the plan I've got." Hal looked at him. "Fine," he said. "I'll take it. But you're going to need help. You can't do it alone and work for Dale Mercer 6 days a week. There's a lawyer in Ashland, name's Brenda Halloran. She used to work with the man I had before he died. She's mean and she's honest, and she doesn't like Roy Calder either. I was going to give you her name eventually. I'm giving it to you now. I can't afford a lawyer. She'll work on what she gets out of him if she likes the case. Contingency. That's the word." Caleb nodded slowly. "Okay. Owen with you today?" "He's inside coloring." "Send him out. I brought him butterscotch." "Yes, sir." The storm came that Saturday night. It had been forecast as rain. It showed up as something else. Caleb got home from the Saturday site at 6:40. The sky was the color of an old bruise to the west. Dale had sent everybody home at 4 because the wind was already taking sheets of house wrap off the framing. And by the time Caleb pulled into his own driveway, the first fat drops were hitting the windshield hard enough to sound like rocks. Owen was on the back porch of the blue house when Caleb pulled up to Ivy's. Ivy had the storm windows half down already and was wrestling with one that wouldn't come. "Get in," she called over the wind. "Let me help." "I've got it." "Ivy, let me help." He took the storm window out of her hands and set it, and then the next one. They did 4 windows in about 6 minutes. The rain was coming sideways by then. Owen was in the kitchen with Hal, helping the old man close cabinet doors, which was something Hal had him do sometimes just to give him a job. The radio was on in the kitchen. The local station was reading a severe storm warning. 60-mile-an-hour gusts, possibility of isolated tornadic activity, power outages likely, and so on. Ivy clicked the radio off when the announcer started to repeat himself. "I'm going to take Owen home," Caleb said. "Get him inside before it gets worse." "Caleb." "Yeah." She was at the sink with her hand on the faucet. She didn't turn the water on. "Don't go home." He stopped. "Stay here," she said. "Both of you. If the power goes out, I know. The concentrator's on a battery backup, but it's only 4 hours. I know, Ivy. Please stay." "Okay." It was the please that did it. Ivy Bennett did not say please. Not about something for herself. "Okay," he said. "We'll stay." The power went out at 8:41. Caleb noted the time because the kitchen clock stopped and he looked at his watch. The house went dark except for the thin gray coming in the windows from a sky that wasn't really a sky anymore. The wind was a thing with shoulders against the walls. Somewhere down the road there was a crack like a gunshot, which was a tree going, and then another one farther off. Ivy was already moving. She had a headlamp in the drawer next to the silverware. She had a second one under the sink. She had batteries and a coffee can on top of the refrigerator. She had candles in the pantry and matches in 2 different places, and a full bathtub upstairs that she had filled while Caleb was taking the storm windows down. Because, she said later, growing up here taught you to fill the tub the minute you heard the word tornadic. Caleb realized, watching her move through her kitchen in the dark with a headlamp strapped to her forehead, that she had done this alone. Many times. In 5 years, however many storms there had been, she had done this alone in this house with an old man she loved, and a machine that wouldn't work without power, and a clock counting down 4 hours in a battery. She had done it alone. She wasn't going to do it alone tonight. "Owen," Caleb said, "come here, bud." Owen came.
"You're going to sit with Mr. Bennett on the couch. Okay? Tell him a story." "A story about what?" "About the cat."
Owen nodded very seriously and went into the living room, where Hal had moved from the couch to the armchair by the fireplace because Hal had announced, when the lights went, that if he was going to die tonight, he was going to do it sitting up. The oxygen concentrator had switched to battery with a small, steady chirp. It was still running. The green light on the front of it was the only light in the room besides the candle on the mantel that Ivy had lit. Caleb followed Ivy into the hallway. "The backup," he said, low. 4 hours. Starting now? Starting when the power went. 8:41. So, 12:41. Give or take. What if it's not back by then? I don't know. Ivy. I don't know, Caleb. He didn't push. Generator? He said instead. I don't have one. Anybody on this road got one? The Caldwells used to. They sold it in the spring. For what? For bills. He nodded. He closed his eyes for a second. Okay, he said. My truck. What? My truck's got an inverter. I put one in 2 years ago. 1,500 watts. Big enough for the concentrator if we run it off the battery with the engine going. Caleb, I'll need a long extension cord. I have one. How long? 100 feet. Granddad bought it for Christmas lights he never put up. Good enough. You're going to run the truck in the driveway for as long as we need to. In this? The truck will be fine. It's parked where a tree can't fall on it. What if it does? Ivy, what if it does? Then we're no worse off than we are right now. She looked at him. I'll get the cord, she said. He went out in the storm. The wind tried to take the back door out of his hand. The rain hit his face hard enough to sting. He got the truck started on the first try, which was a mercy he would remember later. He backed it up onto the grass as close to the kitchen window as he could without putting the tires in the flower beds. And he killed the lights and left the engine running, and he came back inside with the cord coiled over his shoulder, soaked to the skin. Ivy had the oxygen concentrator on the kitchen table already. She had unplugged it from the wall. The battery was chirping faster. Get his mask back on him, Caleb said. I can't move him while it's unplugged for more than... Get the mask off him for 30 seconds while I switch. Caleb. Ivy. Trust me. 30 seconds. She went to Hal. Hal looked up at her with the oxygen cannula in his nose and his mouth tight. Short break, Granddad. For what? Caleb's got the truck. Smart boy. 30 seconds. Take your time. She pulled the cannula off him. Caleb had the extension cord running in the door by now, the end of it plugged into the inverter in the truck. He plugged the concentrator in. The green light blinked once, and then it steadied, and the unit hummed back to life. Okay, he said. She put the cannula back in Hal's nose. Hal closed his eyes. All right, he said. Who wants to finish my book? What book? Owen said. The Louis L'Amour, Chapter 11. The Horse. I don't know how to read chapter books yet. Your daddy does. Caleb looked at Hal. I do? He said. Go get it. Where? End table. My chair. Caleb went and got the book. He came back to the living room where Ivy had pulled 2 kitchen chairs in close to Hal's armchair, and where Owen was already curled up against the side of Hal's knee, like he was a grandson who had been doing that for years. Caleb sat down next to Ivy. He opened the book. He found chapter 11 by the crease along the spine. He read out loud. The wind tried to come in the walls. The rain hit the roof like a steady handful of gravel thrown over and over. Outside, his truck idled in the yard, the extension cord running a thick black line through the cracked open kitchen window to the machine on the table in the hall, which was humming its steady hum and keeping an old man breathing. Caleb read. Hal listened with his eyes closed. Owen leaned harder against Hal's knee. Ivy, beside Caleb, had her hands folded in her lap. At some point, maybe a quarter of the way through the chapter, she put one of her hands on his forearm without looking at him and left it there. And he didn't look at her either, and he kept reading. He read all of chapter 11. He read chapter 12. The man got his horse across the river. At 11:30, the wind started to come down. It didn't stop, but it stopped trying to take the house apart. The rain stayed. The power did not come back. Around midnight, Hal said, without opening his eyes, "Stop reading for a minute." Caleb stopped. "Girl." "Yeah, Granddad." "Come here." She came. She knelt by the arm of the chair. Hal put his hand on top of her head, very lightly, the way you'd put your hand on the head of a bird you didn't want to frighten. "You did good tonight." "Granddad?" "Shut up. You did good tonight, and you did good for 5 years. I have not said it enough." "You've said it?" "Not enough." She was quiet. "Boy." "Yes, sir," Caleb said. "Come here." "Come." He came. He knelt on the other side of the chair. Hal took his hand off of Ivy's head and reached out and took Caleb's wrist, and Caleb was surprised at the strength in the grip. "You got your father's hands," Hal said. "He had strong hands, too. He just used them for the wrong things." "Yes, sir." "You're not him." "No, sir." "Say it." "I'm not him." Again. "I'm not my father." "Good." Hal let go of his wrist and took Ivy's hand in one of his, and Caleb's in the other, and he joined them together over his lap. Ivy's hand was cold. Caleb felt her fingers close around his, very slowly, like she was surprised she was doing it. Hal held their hands together for a long second. Then he said, "I don't have a speech. I'm too tired for a speech. So just that." He let go. Ivy didn't. She left her hand in Caleb's for another second, and then she took it back and she turned her face away so neither of them could see it. "Keep reading," Hal said. Caleb read. At 12:40, the power came back on. It flickered. First, the hall light blinked once, twice, 3 times, like it was asking permission, and then everything came on at once. The kitchen, the lamp by the armchair, the refrigerator shuddering back to life with a groan. The oxygen concentrator's charge light, which had been blinking red, steadied to a slow green pulse. The clock over the stove started blinking 12 o'clock, 12 o'clock, 12 o'clock. Caleb set the book down. "I'll go kill the truck." "Okay." He went out. The rain had stopped. The wind was just wind now, tired and wet. He shut the engine off and unplugged the extension cord and coiled it and brought it back inside and set it on the kitchen floor. Water dripped off him onto the linoleum. In the living room, Hal was asleep. Ivy was watching him sleep. Owen was asleep too, on the floor against the side of the armchair, with one arm thrown across Hal's foot like he was holding the old man down. "I should get him home," Caleb whispered. "He's fine. He's on the floor." "He's fine, Caleb. Let him be." He looked at her. Her face in the lamplight was all one color, and she was crying, not loudly, just a steady quiet leaking out the corners of her eyes that she wasn't trying to hide anymore. He sat down next to her. He didn't know what to do with his hands. He put one of them, tentatively, on her back, between her shoulder blades, and she leaned into it, and then she leaned against his shoulder, and then she was crying against his shoulder, for real, small, jagged shakes that went through her whole body. He didn't say anything. He was smart enough not to say anything. He just held her there with his arm around her, and his other hand still awkwardly on her back, and after a while she stopped shaking, and after a while longer she breathed once, deep and rough, and sat up and wiped her face with the heel of her hand. "I'm sorry." "Don't be." I don't." "Ivy, stop." "Okay." She looked at him. The lamp on the end table put half her face in gold and the other half in shadow. "Caleb." "Yeah." "Thank you for the truck." "Any time." "Don't say any time." "Okay." "I mean that." "Okay." They sat. Hal breathed. The concentrator hummed. Outside, a last piece of something loose on the roof flapped once, twice, and then the wind caught it and tore it off, and it was gone. He's not going to make it much longer, she said to the air in front of her. Is he? Caleb didn't answer. That was not his answer to give. I've been pretending for 5 years, she said. I don't know what I'm going to do when… Ivy,
Don't tell me it's going to be okay. I wasn't going to. Good. It's going to be hard.
That's what I was going to say. It's going to be hard, and it's not going to be okay for a long time, and you're not going to be alone when it happens. She looked at him.
I came here to fix a house, he said. That was it. That was the plan. I was going to fix the house and sell it
And go somewhere with my boy and start over. And I was not going to care about anything but that boy, because I already ruined everything else one time, and I didn't trust myself with any of the rest of it. Caleb, let me finish.
Okay. I don't know what I'm doing. I know. I don't know what this is. I know.
I'm 2 years off a divorce I deserved. I've got a son who still flinches when I raise my voice a little. I've got $1,100 to my name and half a roof. I know. But I'm not leaving. I'm telling you that right now. Not until he's gone and you're standing and the house is yours and Calder is in a hole he dug himself. I'm not leaving before that. And after. He was quiet. I don't know about after, he said. Okay. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. That was the most honest thing anyone said to me in 6 years. She looked at her grandfather's face. Her own face had quieted. Okay, she said, again, softer. Okay. Hal died on Tuesday morning, not from the storm, from something else. His heart probably, the doctor said, or his lungs, or the combination, at 89, of a body that had been holding itself together out of habit and finally put the habit down. Ivy was with him. She said later he woke up at 4 in the morning and asked for coffee, and she made it, and she brought it to the bed in her own mug because it was the closest one, and he drank half of it, and then he said, "That's good coffee, girl," and closed his eyes. And that was it. Just that. No rattle, no gasp. He just stopped. She sat with the mug in her hand for a long time before she put it down and called Caleb. Caleb answered on the second ring. Caleb, I'm here. He's gone. I'm coming. Owen's asleep. Don't wake him.
He's coming too. Caleb, Ivy, he's coming. He needs to know. He loved that old man. Okay, I'm coming. Okay.
He woke Owen and carried him down the stairs in his pajamas with the dinosaur under his arm, and he put him in the truck and drove the half-mile in the dark, because the dark mattered, because she had called him while the sun wasn't up yet, which meant she'd been alone with it for a little while already, and he was not going to make her be alone with it any longer. He walked into the blue house through the back door, and she was sitting at the kitchen table with the empty coffee mug in front of her. She had not been crying. Her face was very still. Owen was half awake in Caleb's arms. He lifted his head. He looked at Ivy. He looked at the closed door of the bedroom down the hall. He looked back at Ivy. He didn't ask. He just reached for her. Ivy took him. She took him into her lap like he weighed nothing. Owen wrapped his arms around her neck and put his face against her shoulder and stayed there. And Ivy held him and closed her eyes. And after a minute her face broke and she started to cry, silently, into his hair. Caleb stood in the doorway and watched his son hold that woman together with his small, thin arms. And he understood, fully and without any of the caveats he had been using for weeks to keep it at arm's length, that he was in love with her, that he had been in love with her probably since the fence, that he was going to stay whether it was the right thing or not, and that after had just become a word that didn't have any meaning anymore, because there wasn't going to be one. There was just this, her at the table, his son in her arms, the coffee cup, the empty bed down the hall, and him, still in the doorway, with water on his boots and rain on his jacket and a truck idling outside, a man who had come home 8 weeks ago to fix a house and sell it, finally and quietly coming apart. He stayed in the doorway for another long second before he made himself move. He crossed the kitchen, slowly, the way you'd cross a room where something was sleeping that you didn't want to wake. He pulled out the chair next to Ivy's. He sat down. He put his hand on the back of her neck gently, under her hair, and she leaned into it without looking at him. And Owen, in her lap, reached one small hand out and laid it flat against Caleb's jaw, and they sat there like that for a long time. The three of them. The empty coffee cup. The closed door. At some point, maybe 20 minutes in, Ivy said, into Owen's hair, "I have to call the doctor." "I'll call. I should call."
Ivy, I know, I should. Okay, go get it done. I'll stay with Owen. She eased the boy off her lap and into Caleb's. Owen made a small sound of protest and then went quiet again when he landed. Ivy stood up and smoothed her hair back with both hands and went to the wall phone and dialed. Caleb held his son and listened to her make the call. Her voice was steady. She said yes 3 times and around 4 this morning, and no, he was expecting it, and thank you for that. Then she hung up and stood there with her hand on the receiver. They'll send somebody in about an hour. Okay. I have to make other calls. Who? His brother. His brother's wife, the church, I don't even know who all. I don't know who all. Make a list. Caleb, make a list. You make the list, I'll dial. She looked at him. Her eyes were red but dry. Okay, she said. She wrote the list on the back of an envelope. A short one. Hal Bennett had outlived most of the people who would have been on it. A brother in Mobile who would not be able to come. The sister-in-law who would. A woman named May from the church they had gone to when Ivy was small. 2 men from Hal's old Thursday coffee group, both of whom would ask the same questions. The funeral home in Millbrook, which Ivy said Hal had already picked years ago because he had wanted to save her the decision. Caleb dialed. Ivy talked. She said the same 6 sentences over and over into the receiver in a voice that didn't crack. And every time she hung up, she stood for a second with her hand still on the phone. And then she looked at Caleb and said next, and he dialed the next number. Owen fell asleep in Caleb's arms halfway through the calls. Caleb carried him to the couch in the living room and laid him down and put the Afghan from the back of the armchair over him. Hal's armchair. He stood looking at the empty chair for a second, the indentation still in the cushion, a pair of reading glasses folded on the little side table next to it, the paperback Western open face down on the lampstand, page saved at chapter 14. A pencil across the arm of the chair where the old man had left it the night before. The smallest evidence of a man who had been in this room 8 hours ago and was not in it now. He turned away from it. He went back to the kitchen. He kept dialing. The doctor came at 5:40. Ivy let him in. He was a tired-looking man in a windbreaker with his bag in one hand and his hat in the other, and he had known Hal for 20 years, and he put his hand on Ivy's shoulder and said, "Honey, I'm sorry," in a voice that meant it, and she nodded once and took him back to the bedroom and shut the door behind them. Caleb stood in the kitchen and didn't know what to do with his hands. On the counter, the stack of envelopes from last month's bills was still there, pushed to one side, the red lettering visible along the edge. Past due. Final notice. The sight of them made something cold turn over in his stomach, because he understood suddenly, with a clarity he hadn't had yesterday, that all of this was now about to get worse. That whatever Calder was going to do, he was going to do it fast now. Because an 89-year-old man with documented medical expenses had been one kind of target, and a single woman who had just buried him was a different kind of target entirely. A worse kind. Easier. He took the envelopes off the counter and moved them into a drawer and shut the drawer. The sister-in-law got there at a little after 9, a thin woman named Bernice with a lot of gray hair and a braid down her back, who drove the 3 hours up from Mobile in a sedan full of casserole dishes, even though nobody had asked her to bring any, because that, she said when Ivy tried to protest, was what you did. She came in and put the dishes on the counter, and then she took Ivy's face in both her hands and looked at her for a long moment, and Ivy started crying for the second time that morning, and Bernice held her while she did it, and Caleb took Owen out of the living room and into the yard to give them the room. It was a cool gray morning. The storm had cleaned everything. The field between the 2 houses was strewn with downed branches and one whole limb off an old sycamore, and the air smelled like wet wood. Owen, in his pajamas and a jacket 2 sizes too big that Caleb had grabbed off the hook on the way out, sat on the porch step and looked at Caleb. "Daddy." "Yeah, bud." "Is he really gone?" "Yeah, he's really gone. He said he would teach me checkers." "I know he did." "On Sunday." "I know." Owen thought about that. "Can you teach me instead?" "Yeah, I can teach you, but not the same." "No, not the same." Owen nodded, very seriously, and looked out at the field. He did not cry. He had not cried yet. Caleb remembered, with a small, sharp pain, that Owen hadn't cried at the divorce either. Owen saved his crying for small things.
Owen saved his crying for a dropped ice cream cone or a scraped knee. The big things he filed away somewhere inside himself, and Caleb did not know yet what the filing was going to cost him later, and it was one of the things he worried about at 4 in the morning on the nights he couldn't sleep.
Owen. Yeah. You can cry about it if you want to. I know. I just wanted to say. Okay. Caleb sat down on the step next to him. Owen leaned against his arm. They sat there in the cold for a while. Daddy? Yeah. Ivy needs us. Caleb looked at his son. Yeah, he said. She does. So we're staying. It wasn't a question. Owen had decided it the way he decided things, quietly and without consulting anyone, and once for good. Yeah, Caleb said. We're staying. The funeral was Friday. It was small. The funeral home in Millbrook did it. Ivy picked out a plain pine box because that was what Hal had written down on a piece of notebook paper tucked in the front of his Bible 15 years ago. Pine box, no flowers. Don't let anybody make a speech that lasts more than 2 minutes. She kept the flowers part. She couldn't keep the no speech part because people came and people had things to say, and she was too tired to stop them. About 30 people came. Bernice, the 2 men from the Thursday coffee group, May and her grown daughter. The man who'd run the feed store with Hal 40 years ago, older than Hal had been and walking with a walker, driven in by his son. A half dozen more Caleb didn't recognize, but Ivy did, and she greeted every one of them by name and thanked every one of them for coming, and Caleb stood a step behind her with Owen's hand in his and watched her hold herself together through all of it. Dale came. That surprised Caleb. Dale showed up in a dark jacket over a flannel shirt, his hair combed flat for what was probably the first time that month, and he walked up to Caleb and said, "Didn't know him, but you're a good hand and I figured you'd want somebody." Then he shook Ivy's hand and said, "Ma'am," and didn't say anything else, and stood at the back with his hands folded in front of him for the whole service. Roy Calder did not come. Caleb noted that. He noted that it meant Calder was smart enough not to come. He also noted that it meant nothing about what Calder was going to do next. At the grave, the man from the funeral home said a few words that were not religious and not long, because he had been hired by Ivy Bennett and she had told him what Hal wanted. Then Ivy stepped forward and put her hand on the lid of the box for a moment and said, to nobody or to everyone, "You were the best man I ever knew. Thank you for raising me." That was all. She stepped back. Caleb put his hand on the small of her back and left it there. Owen, in his small dark jacket, walked forward without being prompted and put something on top of the box. He came back to Caleb and took his hand again. "What was that, bud?" "The butterscotch." "Oh. The one he gave me the first day. I saved it." Caleb nodded. He didn't trust his voice. They went back to the Blue House. Bernice had laid out the casseroles. People came in, ate, spoke quietly, and left in ones and twos. By 4 in the afternoon, the house was empty except for Bernice, Ivy, Caleb, and Owen. And Bernice was washing the casserole pans at the sink in a way that said she had decided she was going to be useful and nobody was going to stop her. Ivy sat down at the kitchen table. She looked at Caleb. "I want to go through his things," she said. "Tonight, before I lose my nerve." "You don't have to do it tonight." "I know I don't, but I want to." "Okay. Will you help me?" "Yes." They started after supper. Bernice said she'd stay through the weekend and take Owen for the evening, and she took Owen to the living room with a deck of cards and taught him gin rummy, and Caleb followed Ivy down the hall to Hal Bennett's bedroom. The room smelled like him. That was the first thing. It smelled like his aftershave and the particular old paper smell of the books stacked on his nightstand, and under it, faintly, the medical smell that had been in the house since Caleb's first visit. The bed had been stripped. The window had been opened earlier and then closed. A suit hung on the closet door, the one Hal had worn to Ivy's grandmother's funeral, Ivy said, 22 years ago, because Ivy had taken it out and then put it back, unable to decide what to do with it. Ivy stood in the doorway for a second. "Okay," she said under her breath. "Okay." She went in. They started with the dresser. She emptied the top drawer into a laundry basket. Socks, handkerchiefs, a folded t-shirt with a feed store logo on it that she held against her face for a second before she put it in the keep pile. And then the second drawer, which was all undershirts and a small tin box full of old keys,
Hal had been unable to throw away because he could never remember what any of them went to. They put the keys aside. They put the undershirts in the laundry basket. The third drawer had papers in it. Ivy lifted out a stack. Tax returns from 2004. Old insurance paperwork. A Christmas card from 1987 that said, "Hal, see you at the game. Earl." Ivy almost laughed. She put it in the keep pile. Under the tax returns was another stack held together with a brown rubber band that broke when she picked it up. Letters, real ones, in envelopes, handwritten, addressed to Hal Bennett at this address. Ivy sat down on the edge of the bed and untied them. The top one had a return address in Mobile and was from his brother. She set it aside. The next one was a handwritten note on lined paper from somebody named Harlan, thanking Hal for a loan he had paid back in 1993. She set that aside too. The third one was different. It was a business letter. The return address said Calder Financial, with an address in Millbrook. The envelope was dated 7 years ago, about a year before Hal had, by Ivy's telling, had his bad year. Ivy opened it. She read it silently. Her face didn't move. Then she folded it and handed it to Caleb without looking at him, and went back to the drawer for the next letter. Caleb read. The letter was short. It was from Roy Calder to Hal Bennett, dated in the spring of a year when, according to what Hal had told him, Hal had had no business with Roy Calder yet. It said, in friendly language, that Calder had been thinking about Hal's situation since their last conversation, and that he wanted to make sure Hal understood all his options regarding the property. It referenced a prior meeting that Ivy, reading over his shoulder now, said her grandfather had never mentioned. It referenced a proposal that Hal had apparently declined, which the letter gently but firmly suggested Hal reconsider. It was not a threatening letter. It was worse than that. It was the careful, cheerful letter of a man who had already decided he was going to win and was just giving the other man a chance to surrender with dignity. Ivy, Caleb said, keep looking. There were more letters like it. 5 more over the next 2 years, according to the dates on the envelopes. The tone got less friendly with each one. The last one was a year before Hal's bad year. The year, Caleb was now beginning to think, that had not been bad at all until Calder made it bad. Under the letters was a manila folder. Ivy opened it. Inside were copies, careful, numbered, the way an accountant would keep copies, of every statement Hal Bennett had received from Calder Financial since the note had been transferred. There were also, clipped to the back of the statements, a stack of handwritten notes on yellow legal paper in Hal's small, tight handwriting. Page after page of them. Calculations, dates, check numbers, a running log of every time a late fee had been assessed and the date it had been assessed on, with Hal's own reconstruction of when the payment had actually cleared his bank.
He was keeping records, Ivy said. Yeah, he was keeping records. Ivy, look at this. On the last page of the legal pad, Hal had written in block letters, underlined, he is charging late fees on payments not late. Rate adjusting without notice. Check Contract Clause 14. Check State Law. Tell Ivy if I forget. Under it, in smaller letters, Brenda Halloran, Ashland. She will know what to do. Ivy read it. She read it again. She set the pad down on her lap. He knew, she said. He knew. He knew, and he didn't tell me. He was protecting you. He was... Her voice caught. She stopped. She took a breath. He was protecting me, yeah. He was protecting me up until his heart stopped. That's who he was. That's exactly who he was. She put her hand over her mouth. Caleb sat down on the bed next to her. He didn't touch her. He let her sit with it. After a minute, she took her hand down. How much of it do we have? All of it. 7 years of statements, his own records. Caleb, yeah. Is it enough? I don't know. I'm not a lawyer. We need a lawyer. He wrote down the name. I saw. I'll call her Monday. Monday? It's Friday night, Ivy. I can't call her tonight. Right. She looked at the folder in her lap like it was a live thing. I want to see Calder, she said. Ivy, I want to look him in the face. Not tonight. I know not tonight. I want to see him. Soon. We'll see him. We. Yeah, we. She looked at him. Her eyes were wet but fierce, and the tired in them that had been there since the first day at the fence had, for the first time, sharpened into something else. "Okay," she said.
They didn't finish the dresser that night. They didn't have to. They took the folder and the letters and the legal pad out of the bedroom, and Ivy put them in the kitchen on the table where the red envelopes had been, and they went to bed, each in a separate room, Caleb on the couch with Owen against his chest, because Bernice had taken the spare room and nobody was going to send Caleb Rowan and his little boy home at 10 o'clock at night after the day they'd had. Monday morning at 8, Caleb called Brenda Halloran's office in Ashland. The receptionist put him through to her after he said Hal Bennett's name. Brenda Halloran's voice on the phone was low and flat and a little amused, the voice of a woman who had talked to a lot of people in a lot of trouble and found most of them more interesting than she was expected to. "Mr. Rowan." "Yes, ma'am." "Hal Bennett was a friend of mine." "I know." "I didn't know he passed." "Tuesday morning." "God damn it."
"Yes, ma'am." "Is Ivy all right?"
She's upright."
That's a Hal answer if I ever heard one.
"Yes, ma'am." "Why are you calling, Mr. Rowan?" "Because Hal wrote your name down on the last page of a legal pad full of notes about Roy Calder, and I think we've got 7 years of documentation that Calder's been running a fraud on his property, and I don't know what to do with it." A silence. "Can you be at my office tomorrow at 2? "Yes, ma'am." "Bring the folder." "Yes, ma'am." "Bring Ivy." "She'll come." "Good. 2 o'clock. Don't be late. I have a 3:30 I can't move." She hung up. Brenda Halloran's office was on the second floor of a red brick building on a corner in Ashland, over a shop that sold used books and had a cat in the window. The stairs up were narrow. Ivy went first. Caleb went behind her with the folder. They had left Owen with Bernice, who had extended her visit indefinitely because Bernice had watched Ivy sit at the funeral and had decided, without consulting anyone, that she wasn't going back to Mobile yet. Brenda Halloran met them in the hall. She was maybe 60, short, with white hair cut blunt at her jaw, a navy blazer over a gray sweater, and the direct, unfooled eyes of a woman who had been practicing country law for 35 years. She shook Ivy's hand first. She held it for a second. "Your granddaddy was a pain in the ass." "Yes, ma'am." "I liked him very much." "He liked you." "Come in." Her office was small. 2 chairs in front of a desk covered in paper, a window that looked down on the sidewalk. She sat behind the desk. Ivy and Caleb sat in front of it. Brenda looked at the folder on Caleb's lap. "Give it here." He gave it. She opened it. She put on a pair of half-moon reading glasses. She turned pages without speaking. She read for a long time, 15, 20 minutes, while Caleb and Ivy sat in silence and the cat in the window downstairs meowed once, audibly, through the floor. Brenda turned to the last page of the legal pad. She read Hal's block letter note. She took her glasses off. She set them on top of the folder. "Well," she said. She looked at Ivy. "Honey, your grandfather kept better records than my accountant." That was him. This is a lot of what I would need. But not all. Not all. I'm going to need the original contract, the one he signed when Calder bought the note. Not a copy. The original, if we can get it. I'm going to need bank statements to correlate the dates. I'm going to need... Well, you leave that list to me. Okay. And I'm going to need you to understand something before we start, Ivy. Yes, ma'am. This is going to be slow. Even if I'm right, and I think I'm right, it is going to be slow. Calder has a lawyer in Millbrook who is not a good lawyer, but is a stubborn one. He's going to drag it out. He's going to file things. He's going to try to scare you. In the middle of it, he's probably going to start the foreclosure paperwork on the house, because that is what men like him do when they feel cornered. He'll push harder, not softer. Do you understand? Yes. The house might get hung up in it for a while. Okay. Worst case, we end up in court, and you have to sit in a courtroom 3 towns over for 2 days and listen to a man with bad hair tell a judge you don't know what you're talking about, and we'll win, and it'll take another 6 months to get his hand off your property. Okay? Best case, I send him a letter next week with the right numbers on it, and he folds, which is more likely. Middle case, which is, we send the letter, he doesn't fold, we file, he panics. Something shakes loose, months, not years, and some of it is going to be ugly. Ivy sat for a second. Is it winnable? Yes. You're sure? Honey, I've been a lawyer since before you were born. I don't use that word unless I mean it. Yes. Ivy looked at Caleb. Okay, she said. Okay. Do it. Brenda nodded once. I work on contingency on cases like this. 30% of whatever we recover, including what you've already overpaid him, which, she tapped the legal pad, based on your grandfather's math, is somewhere in the neighborhood of $18,000 over 7 years. That's before interest, penalties, and anything a court might want to add on. Ivy went very still. 18,000. 18,400 and change. By my first pass through this. I'd want to verify, but that's the ballpark. Ivy looked at Caleb. Caleb looked at her. Okay, she said. Okay. Sign me up. Brenda smiled, small and sharp. That's what I wanted to hear. They signed the engagement papers on her desk. Brenda made them coffee from a machine behind her desk that she apologized for. The coffee was terrible. Nobody mentioned it. When they stood up to leave, Brenda said, "One more thing." "Yes, ma'am." "Calder is going to figure out you've hired me within a week. He has people in the courthouse. When he does, he's going to send somebody around to your house to pressure you. Not him. Somebody who works for him. Don't answer the door to anyone you don't know. Okay? You got a phone?" "Yes." "Call me if anything happens. Anytime. I mean that." "Yes, ma'am." "And Ivy." "Yes, ma'am." Your granddaddy would have walked into that man's office and hit him in the mouth. We're not going to do that. We are going to do it the other way, which is slower. But it is the way that ends with you keeping your house. Ivy nodded, just once. "Yes, ma'am." The man came on Thursday. Caleb was at work. Ivy had taken Owen into town for groceries and to pick up his prescription at the drugstore. Owen had gotten an ear infection from the cold snap, something small and ordinary that Caleb had paid cash for at the urgent care on Wednesday night, and that had taken another $70 out of the can on the table. And they came back to the Blue House at around 4 in the afternoon to find a black pickup in the driveway and a man in a windbreaker sitting on the back steps. Ivy stopped the car at the head of the driveway. The man stood up. He was in his 40s, thick-necked, with a face that Ivy didn't recognize and a smile that didn't touch his eyes. "Stay in the car, bud," Ivy said. "Who is that?" "I don't know. Stay in the car." She got out, leaving the engine running. She walked halfway up the driveway and stopped. The man came off the steps and met her in the middle of the yard. "Miss Bennett?" "Who are you?" "I work for Mr. Calder. He asked me to come by and express condolences." "Thank you. You've expressed them. He also asked me to remind you that the November payment is due in 2 weeks." "I know when it's due." "He wanted me to say he understands you've been through a lot, and he wanted to offer." "He didn't come to the funeral." The man paused. "Sorry? Roy Calder didn't come to the funeral, my grandfather's funeral, which Roy Calder was invited to by way of the notice in the paper like everybody else in this town. He didn't come. Don't tell me he's expressing condolences. Ma'am, I don't know your name." "Earl." "Earl, I want you off my property. Mr. Calder wanted to offer—" "Earl, I want you off my property." The man looked at her. He took a step closer. He was bigger than she was, which Caleb would learn later, and he used it, which Caleb would not forget. "Mr. Calder wanted to offer," the man said, slower now, "a refinancing option to help you out, given your situation." "My situation." "Alone. With the house. Without your grandfather." Ivy looked at him for a long second. "You're scaring me on purpose," she said, not as a question, as a fact. "Aren't you?" "Ma'am, I'm not—" "You are. That's what a Mr. Calder sent you here to do." "Miss Bennett, get off my property." "I'm going to leave this with you." He held out an envelope. She did not take it. He set it on the step behind him. He smiled again, the same dead smile. "You have a good day now." He walked past her. She did not turn to watch him walk past. She stood with her back to him until she heard his truck door shut, and then the engine start, and then the sound of his tires on the gravel as he pulled out. Then she walked very quickly to her car, got in, put her forehead against the wheel, and breathed for 10 seconds before she looked up at Owen. Owen was staring at her. "Ivy." "I'm okay, bud." Was that the bad man? That was a man who works for the bad man. Oh, I'm okay, bud. He's gone. We're okay. Owen reached across the seat and put his hand on her arm. I'm glad you made him leave, he said. Ivy put her hand over his. Me too. She pulled the car into the driveway. She left Owen in the car for a second while she went up to the step and picked up the envelope and opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a refinancing proposal from Calder Financial, offering Ivy Bennett an extended term on her grandfather's note at a lower monthly payment in exchange for adding 3 years to the loan and adjusting the interest rate upward by 1.25 points. At the bottom was a handwritten note in pen. We're sorry for your loss. Let's help you stay in your home. Roy. Ivy stood on the step with the paper in her hand for a second. Then she took it inside and put it on the kitchen table and called Caleb at the job site. Caleb came home at dusk with his jaw set in a way Owen had never seen before. He walked into the kitchen without taking off his boots. He picked up the phone. He dialed Brenda Halloran's office and got her answering service and left a message. He hung up. He sat down at the table and looked at the paper. Ivy. Yeah, I want you to listen to me. Okay? I'm not going to go over there tonight. Okay. I'm going to want to. I'm going to sit at this table and want to very badly for the next 6 hours. I'm not going to go. Do you understand why I'm telling you? She looked at him. Because you need me to help you not go. Yes. Okay. If I go tonight, I play his game. I give him a thing to file against me. I give him a reason to drag this out. Brenda said slow. This is the slow part. This is where he wants me to lose my head. Okay? Ivy. Yeah. I'm going to sit here with you until I stop wanting to go. Okay. He sat. He sat for 3 hours. Ivy made supper. She fed Owen. She gave him his antibiotic. She put him on the couch with a book. She came back into the kitchen and sat across from Caleb and did not try to talk him down and did not try to distract him. She just sat with him. Around 8, she got up and made coffee. Around 9, she made another pot. Around 10, she said, How are you doing? Worse than an hour ago. Okay. Better than 3. Okay. I'm not going. I know. I want you to say it back to me. You're not going tonight. Thank you. At 11, Brenda Halloran called back. Caleb answered. He told her what had happened. He read her the note at the bottom of the refinancing offer. She was silent for a second. Put that in a Ziploc bag, she said. Don't handle it any more than you already have. I want his handwriting and his prints on it both. I'll be by tomorrow at noon to pick it up. Yes, ma'am. And Mr. Rowan? Yes, ma'am. Don't go over there. I'm not going. Good man. She hung up. Caleb set the phone in the cradle. He turned around. Ivy was in the kitchen doorway with her arms crossed over her chest and her face very tired. Okay, he said. Okay. I'm okay. I know. Come here. She came. He put his arms around her. It was the first time he had done it. He was still wearing his work jacket. Her hair smelled like the kitchen, coffee and onion and faintly the laundry soap she used, which was the same kind his mother had used 20 years ago. He held her for a long time, without moving, his chin against her temple, and he felt her breathing slow. He felt it like a small, steady thing happening against his chest. Caleb? Yeah. Thank you for not going. Don't thank me. I'm thanking you. Okay. Caleb? Yeah. She lifted her face. She was very close. Her eyes looked at him the way they had looked at him across the fence on the first day, except without the guard up. He had not, until this second, understood that on the first day there had been a guard up. He kissed her. It wasn't a kiss he had planned. He didn't have room in his head to plan a kiss. It was a thing that happened because he turned his face half an inch, and her mouth was there. And he did not have any of himself left over at that moment for the small, polite hesitations. He kissed her, lightly, careful, and she kissed him back, her hand coming up to rest flat against his chest over his heart, and then he lifted his head a little and looked at her. Ivy. Yeah. I don't want to do that wrong. Then don't. I mean, I don't want to do it while you're exhausted and scared, and Caleb Rowan, I have been exhausted and scared for 6 years. If you're going to wait for me to not be, you're going to wait forever.
Okay. Okay. He kissed her again. Longer, this time. Her hand flattened against his chest and then slid up to the side of his neck, and he put his hand against the side of her face and felt, under his thumb, the tired hollow under her eye. And he felt, somewhere under his ribs, a thing he had been carrying around for 8 weeks settle at last into a shape he could name. I love you, he said, against her mouth, like it was something she had a right to hear whether or not he was ready to say it. I know. I don't know when that happened. I do. When? The truck. The truck. The night you ran the extension cord in. When you read him the Louis L'Amour. That was a week and a half ago. That's when I knew. When it happened was probably before that. Yeah. Yeah. He held her. She held him. The coffee on the stove had gone cold. Owen, in the living room, had fallen asleep on the couch with the book open on his chest, and Caleb would carry him to the spare room in a minute. The spare room that had become Owen's when they were over, which was now most nights. Bernice had gone back to Mobile on Saturday, but had said she was coming up for Thanksgiving, and don't even think about telling me I don't have to. On the kitchen table, the refinancing paper sat in its envelope next to the folder of Hal's records. In the driveway, Caleb's truck. In the bedroom down the hall, Hal's empty bed, the suit still hanging on the closet door. Outside, the sound of the country night. A dog somewhere, a long way off, and under it, the deeper stillness of November in a place where most people had already gone to bed. I'm going to put my son to bed, Caleb said, into her hair. Okay. And then I'm going home. I know. I'm coming back in the morning. I know. He kissed the top of her head. He went into the living room and picked up his sleeping son. Owen made a small sound and put his arm around Caleb's neck without waking. At the door, Ivy stood with her hand on the frame. She looked at the two of them. She looked tired, and she looked like she'd been crying off and on for a week, which she had, and she looked, underneath all of it, for the first time since the first day at the fence, like a woman who believed she might be allowed to rest. Caleb. Yeah. We're going to win this. Yeah, we are, so okay. Okay. He walked out into the cold with Owen in his arms and carried him across the field to the house he had come home to 11 weeks ago to fix and sell, and he put him in the little bed over the porch, and he stood in the doorway for a minute watching his son breathe, and then he went downstairs and sat at the kitchen table in the dark, and he did not do the math. For the first time in 11 weeks, he did not pick up the pencil and do the math. He just sat there in the dark with his hands flat on the table, and after a while he got up and went to bed. Brenda Halloran sent the letter on a Tuesday in the middle of November, and Roy Calder did not fold. He did what she'd said he would do. He filed, he pushed, he hired a second lawyer out of the city who knew less about Hal Bennett's handwriting than the first one did. And for 4 months, while the winter came down hard on that country road and then slowly let up again, Caleb Rowan worked his 6 days a week on Dale Mercer's cruise and came home at dusk and ate supper at the Blue House with Ivy and Owen and the cat, and slept at his own place across the field because Ivy had said not yet, not in front of the boy, not until this is over. And Caleb had agreed without making her say why, because he understood why. They saw Brenda every other Thursday. They brought her copies of things. She brought them small victories, the kind she warned them not to celebrate. In January, a judge in Ashland ordered Calder Financial to produce the original note within 30 days, and Calder's lawyer asked for 60, and the judge gave him 45. And Brenda came out of that hearing to the bench where Ivy and Caleb were waiting in the hall and said, "He's scared now. He wasn't scared before. Now he's scared." And Ivy sat down on the bench and cried for 30 seconds, and then stood up and wiped her face and said, "Okay, what's next?" What was next was the note itself, when it finally came, which was written in a way that did not match the statements Calder had been sending for 7 years, different rate, different term, different language around late fees, and which, under Brenda's eye and then under a forensic accountant, Brenda brought in from Birmingham, unraveled in about 4 hours. Calder had been adjusting the math on paper and sending Hal the adjusted version and keeping the original in a drawer. It was not sophisticated. It was the kind of fraud that worked on old men who trusted banks and didn't keep their own copies. It had not worked on Hal Bennett, who had. And because Hal had kept copies, and because Ivy had found them in a drawer under a Christmas card from 1987, it stopped working on Roy Calder altogether. Calder settled in March.
He settled because settling was cheaper than going to court and having the Myers and the Caldwells find out. Brenda made sure the Myers and the Caldwells found out anyway. They came and found their own lawyer by April. Calder's office on Main and Elm closed in June. He moved to Florida, Caleb heard. Not from Brenda, but from the man at the hardware store, who told him in the same voice he'd used the first day, the voice of a man used to reading people, and who added, without being asked, good riddance. The check came to Ivy in the mail the week after the settlement. $23,411. She opened it at the kitchen table and held it in both hands, and looked at Caleb across the table and said, I don't know what to do with this much money. You don't have to know today. Caleb? Yeah? The porch. What about it? Part of the porch, the side with the big window. I always wanted, I know what you wanted. You do? Ivy, you told me 3 different times when you thought I wasn't listening. I didn't know you were listening. I was always listening. She used 11,000 of it on the porch and the room behind the porch, which they framed in together on weekends through the spring, and which she painted herself in a soft green she had picked off a paint chip she'd kept in her wallet for 9 years. She put in 6 small tables, mismatched, from estate sales. She put in 2 shelves of books along the back wall, half of them Hal's, half of them hers. She bought a used espresso machine from a closing restaurant in Millbrook for $400 and taught herself to use it off YouTube videos Caleb played for her on his laptop at the kitchen table. She called it the Blue House because it was the Blue House, and because she had decided she was done being clever about things. It opened on a Saturday in May. 41 people came, which in that town was everybody who wasn't at work. Dale Mercer came. He brought his wife, whom Caleb had never met, a woman with gray hair and a loud laugh who told Ivy the cinnamon rolls were the best she'd ever had, and meant it. Bernice drove up from Mobile. Brenda Halloran came and sat in the corner and drank 2 cups of coffee and told Ivy the espresso was adequate, which was, Brenda made clear, the highest praise she gave anyone. Caleb sold his mother's house in July. Not for much. Enough. He bought back 2.5 acres of the Bennett land that Hal had sold off in the bad year, because Calder had been holding the paper on it too, and Brenda had gotten it unwound, and he put his money into fixing up the barn on it so he could run a small framing outfit of his own, because Dale had said, in April, with a mouthful of sandwich and no preamble, go out on your own. You're costing me money staying. I'll send you work. He had meant it. He sent work. Caleb hired Reuben and a kid from Ashland named Toby and a second kid whose name he forgot twice before it stuck, and they framed 3 houses that summer and paid themselves in real checks, and Owen turned 7 in August and had a birthday party at the cafe with a cake Ivy made in the shape of a dinosaur that was, she admitted, structurally unsound but tasted fine. They got married in October, a year almost to the day after he had driven up to his mother's house with a coffee can and a boy and nothing else. They did it at the courthouse in Ashland on a Thursday afternoon because neither of them wanted a wedding. Bernice was there. Brenda was there, in a navy blazer and a small silver pin shaped like a key that she said she'd worn to 3 of her own weddings and was saving for Ivy's. Dale was there. Owen was there in a button-down shirt that was too big in the shoulders, holding the rings in a ring pop box because Caleb had lost the original box in the truck that morning. When the clerk asked Caleb to say his vows, he said them without the card he had brought, because the card was also in the truck, and what he said instead was, Ivy Bennett, I have known you since I was 12 years old, and I didn't deserve you then, and I don't deserve you now, and I'm not going to waste any more time pretending that matters. Ivy laughed, which is how she cried when she cried in public. She said, I was going to say something nicer, but I'll just say yes. That evening they drove home to the Blue House, their Blue House now, with his truck in the driveway and Owen's bike on the porch and Mittens on the step. And they sat out on the new side of the porch, the green one, where the cafe windows were, with 2 coffees and the last light of an October day on the field. Caleb put his hand on her knee. She put her hand on his. Caleb. Yeah. I used to think a man was going to come save me from all this. Yeah? Yeah, then my grandfather died and I thought, nobody's coming, and I got ready to do it alone. And you didn't save me. He laughed once. No, ma'am, I didn't. We just stayed, both of us. That's all we did.
We just stayed. He looked at her. Somewhere in this story, there is probably a lesson, which is that the people who fix a life are almost never the ones who ride in with the money or the answers or the speeches. They are the ones who sit in the kitchen with you while you fall apart, who run an extension cord through a window in a storm, who read a chapter of a book out loud to a dying man because he wants to know how the horse got across the river. Love, the real kind, the kind that lasts, doesn't come through the front door with a plan. It walks up a gravel driveway with a busted truck and a 6-year-old and no idea what it's doing, and it stays, clumsy and scared and imperfect, and it keeps staying. And one day you look up and realize the life you thought was over has very quietly, while you weren't paying attention, become a life worth keeping. Caleb Rowan had come home to fix a house and sell it. He never did sell it, but the one he lived in now, across the field, under a patched roof and a green porch, with a tired, good woman beside him and a small boy asleep upstairs and a cat on the step, that one he had built. And that one at last was his.